Um, my husband and I co-lead this wonderful ministry of recovery here at Community of Hope, and tonight is one of my favorite nights because it's a testimony night. Woo! And I'm especially excited about this testimony because when I read it, I just got so pumped up. I was like, this is why we do it, and just how cool it is to see how through working our recovery, how God starts to remove layers and add other pieces to it, and just the wonderfulness of it. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite up our friend, Lindsay.
Hi, guys. All right, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is as close as I'll ever get to the Secret Service. So I'm taking full advantage right now, so thank you so much. So hi, I'm Lindsay. Hi. And I am in recovery from drugs and alcohol, and I come to Celebrate Recovery to work on my codependency. So I'm really grateful to God for allowing me to even stand up here tonight and to be able to share my testimony with you all. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment of silence for those who are still sick and suffering, who have not yet made it to the rooms, and for those who don't know that there's another way. Thank you. And someday I really do want to come up here and just speak from my heart, but I get so nervous. And my brain just goes really fast, so I did write it down beforehand and send it to Sarah to be approved. I also did pray to have God right-size me because I'm usually way on one end of the spectrum, not good enough, too good. So I've really been praying just to be right-sized for today. So, again, like I said, I'm honored to be able to stand up here. I've been in and out of 12-step programs for over 13 years now, and I've been clean and sober for the past 8.5 years. I remember, thank you. So I remember coming to my first meeting and being like, wow, this is so cool for these people, but that could never be me. Or having just the typical thoughts of, terminal uniqueness where, okay, that definitely is working for them, but something like that could never work for me. And luckily I was wrong. Typically I don't like being wrong, but in that case, I'm grateful for that. So I'm originally from Connecticut. I grew up, people from Connecticut love other people from Connecticut. And so I was an only child, and I grew up with my mom and dad. And I love them so much today, and we do have a really good relationship, so that's another gift of recovery I've received. Now, along the way, I've attended most 12-step programs, and I pretty much qualify for each and every one of them. They say that in the program there's ACA, which is Adult Children of Alcoholics or Dysfunctional Families, and in the literature, they talk about 3 rules. They're not written, they're not spoken, but they're just 3 rules that you learn growing up in a household with alcohol or dysfunction. And those are don't talk, don't trust, and don't feel. So growing up, I learned these very quickly and exceptionally well. I've done a lot of work with my sponsor and in therapy and in ACA and Celebrate Recovery regarding this area, and I don't hold anything against them today. I know that they did the best with what they knew at the time. I was in denial for a while, and I would tell everybody that I had the best childhood growing up. And please don't get me wrong, I'm very fortunate. I have wonderful memories, and I have really a loving family. But I've recently had to take a hard look at how certain things affected me even to this day. So I now realize that I too, along the way, I did the best that I could with what I knew at the time. I like to believe that everybody's doing the best that they can. This has allowed me to have more compassion, not just for myself and for my parents, but also just for everybody. It's helped me heal and grow. They say when you know better, you do better. So this is kind of odd to bring up, but when I was around 11 or 12 years old, I remember having a conversation with someone, and they asked if I smoked weed. For whatever reason, in that moment, I lied, and I said yes. and I pretended that I had. So from that point out, I was on a mission to find some weed to smoke to, in a way, like erase my lie. And they say in AA that we have a thinking problem, not a drinking problem, and that was definitely my case. Now, I wrote every single essay possible in high school on why marijuana is not a gateway drug, but for my story, I guess it kind of was. I started seeking out drugs and alcohol and really enjoyed the escape it provided me. I put all of my time, energy, and attention towards getting a vehicle, getting some money, and making some elaborate excuse to leave the house. Along the way, I tried every substance offered and eventually found myself severely addicted to cocaine and heroin. I absolutely could not stop. I could not stop lying, and I could not stop stealing. It's also really sad to say that many of the friends I had during that time are no longer around. I firmly believe that dying from this disease is an absolute waste, and I often think about how that easily could have been me. In my active addiction, I was extremely manipulative, and I used my parents' own dysfunction as leverage for as long as possible. I would guilt them or blame them anytime they attempted to confront me. I would point the finger back at them to avoid taking any responsibility for my behavior, my deceit, and the issues that I was causing. I went on for a while without having any true repercussions. Ultimately, though, I was forced into treatment at the age of 18. I was pissed. Everyone kept telling me how great it was that I was so young, and if I could just get this now, how I had my whole life ahead of me. I would look at them and stone cold face tell them how it's not fair that you got to party and have fun longer than I've even been alive. And I was serious. Now, they say some are sicker than others, and I was really sick. But I do get it now. The party and the fun were well over. I heard in a meeting once that when someone tries to get clean or sober, and then they go back to using or drinking, it kind of ruins any fun and that was true in my case. So after this treatment, I tried attending meetings, but that was all I did. And after about 6 months of what they call white knuckling it, I went back to drugs and alcohol. And I hit my bottom pretty quickly. I woke up in the hospital numerous times. I had many near-death experiences in my car and in my father's car, and just in general. And it was definitely no longer fun. I was continuing to hurt the people that I love most. By this time, my friends were off at college, and meanwhile, I had run away from college in this time span after only about 2 weeks. I really said they didn't have enough drugs there. I don't know. So anyway, due to my addiction and my codependency, I just wasn't functioning. I was not participating in my own life. I was not able to stop on my own, despite trying and desperately wanting to many times. I really thought isolating would work because most of the friends I had at the time were busy getting high. And then I did have a group of really good friends, but I stopped answering their phone calls because I was so ashamed of my addiction. Unfortunately, the last person who told me that it was a good idea to get high or drunk was me, so left to my own devices, I was not able to acquire any clean time. During this time span, I tried exercise, sleeping in my spare time, watching TV, reading all the self-help books. I tried therapy, but eventually the therapist said I was wasting my parents' money because I wasn't making any true changes, and she was right. I tried methadone maintenance, and that was the worst of all because I still had the compulsion to use even though it wasn't physical at that point. This really, really scared me. I made it back down to Florida for treatment number 2, and I still did not take rehab seriously. I think I thought it was like my makeshift college experience because I participated in groups, I made a lot of friends, I even had fun without being high or drunk, which is great to know that I could, but I didn't take any suggestions upon leaving, and I got high the same day and same hour that I left. I continued to run and use for about a year before moving back to Connecticut halfway through. Ultimately, I came back to treatment here in Florida, and this time my parents told me to bring all my stuff. I was a complete mess. I wasn't even a hot mess, just a mess. I cried a lot. I felt utterly hopeless. I was terrified of relapsing again, but I really didn't believe that I could actually stay clean and sober. I took a lot of the suggestions, even when I didn't want to. I went to a halfway house, a very strict one. I called 3 women almost daily, and I lived there for about a year. I got a sponsor who had a sponsor. I worked the steps, and my life improved tremendously. Even during this time, my mom got sober herself. They say a lot that this program is about attraction, not promotion, and this was true for her. I had told her to get help numerous times, and she attempted many times, but she was not able to continue to stay sober. I remember that she told me it was because she saw me doing well, she was finally able to do well. I'm unbelievably grateful for her and her sobriety today, and also to my father and just for their support. I have a wonderful relationship with them, and that's the most amazing gift I could ask for, especially since most of my amends were to them. I was heavily involved in recovery for a few years. I was even working in the field, and I was excelling. But then I got really comfortable, very complacent. I stopped going to meetings, and then I stopped calling my sponsor. I started to justify how I don't really need the meetings, or I would just talk myself out of calling my sponsor because I knew what she would say. I would shift the blame to the fallibility of just humanness with people in the rooms, and I would tell myself that I was better off getting my recovery in other ways. And at this time, I was doing healthy things, and I continued to do well for a while. The thing is, I don't want to work what they call like a recovery buffet today, where I just take and keep taking, and I don't give back. And that's really a big part of what I was missing. I went on for a few years, led by ego and a very loud inner critic. I was somehow simultaneously thinking that I was too good to have to go to meetings, but also not giving myself any credit for not using drugs or alcohol, which is silly, because when I think about it, growing up being predisposed, like genetically and environmentally, and just thinking about how I used to live, like that's absolutely an accomplishment. I also thought that I didn't have anything to offer anybody else. This has been a big lie that I've told myself for years, and this has only recently shifted when I strengthened my relationship with God and community here at Community of Hope and Celebrate Recovery. So I'll bring you to about a year and a half ago before I came to Celebrate Recovery. I was newly married and very deep in my codependency. I thought it was my husband's job now to make me happy, and by no means was it working. I hadn't yet dealt with the ACA stuff in depth, and I can see now where I truly came into the relationship as an adult child, which understandably did not go over well. I noticed myself waking up restless, irritable, and discontent, and just staying in it. The big book of AA states that when I am unwilling to do the right thing, I become restless, irritable, and discontent. It is always my choice. So I was working remotely, and I was isolating due to moving out here. I was putting a lot of pressure on my husband and myself, and I was not getting any positive results. My daily life felt so miserable and unmanageable that I finally again had the gift of desperation, and I decided to give Celebrate Recovery a shot. I did what I learned when I first got clean and sober. I came to a meeting right here. I went into the small group, I raised my hand, I shared, I cried, and I talked to the women after. After the meeting, wonderful women who are here tonight approached me, and I felt like I was just starting all over. The good news is that I remembered a lot of what I had learned before, and more clarity continued to come back. I've had great support in this room. I've had to unlearn and relearn a lot this past year or so. It's important for me to stay reachable and also stay teachable. I remember someone told me years ago how growth and recovery is about being uncomfortable, so get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I also had to learn again that what other people are thinking about me is quite literally none of my business. And my favorite one lately, oftentimes how people act towards me usually doesn't have anything to do with me, as long as I'm being kind. I am only responsible for my actions and my responses. The good news, too, is that this time I have a much deeper connection with Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit. This is a new part for me, which has allowed me to trust and have faith, which is still challenging for me. I had a connection with the higher power previously, but it was not as intimate. And because of this new intimacy, I do believe I've been able to surrender more. When they talk about surrender, surrender is essentially letting go, which is a vital part of the process of recovery. It's letting go of resistance and submitting to God. It's much easier for me to submit to a God who feels more like my friend rather than like the universe, which is a little bit more intangible for me. Surrender also deals with letting go of old beliefs that did not work, as well as behaviors. Mine, even today, if God's not fully involved, they don't work. There are many times that I still try to pretend to be a little God trying to control outcomes or people's behaviors, and every time I come back defeated, and it never serves anybody's best interest. I've revisited the concept of acceptance because this is usually what it comes back to. In treatment, they had me writing this on repeat, a whole notebook, from page 417 to 18 in the Big Book of AA. It reads, "Acceptance is the answer to all of my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life, unacceptable to me. I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment." And that's challenging, so I have to go back to that often. So when they talk about acceptance, this means learning to relinquish control, realize my own limitations, and face reality. This is why I need God, and I need people, and really I need people who also have God. The people I've found in this very room are the ones that have been able to show up or answer the phone and give me a piece of reality which I'm so incapable of seeing when I'm in it. I've been able to come to terms this past year that this process truly isn't a race. There's really no end of the healing and growing process. And now, instead of resenting that, I'm actually learning to enjoy that. It's kind of a relief. And much of my recovery has been about a perspective change. That's usually the sweet spot for me, where my outward circumstances don't change, but my view of them does. Working with my sponsor and sponsees has been such an amazing gift and definitely a God experience this time around. I'm focusing now on my responsibility and making sure that I'm doing the next right thing consistently for God and for me. And I'm seeking validation from God. This is especially useful to remember when I'm dealing with people that are not working on themselves or not working a program of recovery. I still often feel that people's actions, reactions, feelings, and behaviors are somehow caused by me, and I need healthy people to keep me in check and accountable to remind me that that's just a lie I tell myself. I'm working on mindfulness and self-compassion in the tougher moments. I've embraced the fact that I've struggled and made mistakes because I can see where I needed to take a look at my own behaviors once again, and that's luckily all I can control, with God's help, of course. I'll be honest, life goes a lot easier when I have God in it. Step 11 reads, "Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out." That has been the main focus for me this year. I'm implementing inviting God into my day, into my thoughts, into my behaviors and actions on a daily basis and consistently throughout the day. I realize now that this is what they mean by conscious contact. It's also kind of like a constant contact. If you're sitting here tonight and you don't think that this program is for you, I highly encourage you to look up the promises of AA. Essentially, they promise freedom, happiness, and a life without regret. They promise an interest in other people and a changed attitude. They promise our intuition increases when dealing with challenging situations. I remember thinking, wow, that would all be so nice. I'm here to tell you that they can be true for you as well. Just keep coming back. It really comes back to the first part of the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you so much for letting me share.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that beautiful story of just experience, strength, and hope of how God has worked inside of your life. Very much like you, when I first entered into the rooms, I went to AA. I had looked at everybody else and thought, that's good for them. That would never actually work for me. And just as you so poignantly said, I am so glad that I was wrong, because it can definitely work for me, it can work for you, it can work for all of us here. And so with that, thank you so much. And the other point I loved was reachable and teachable. I mean, that is just it in a nutshell, because for me, I know that when I am reverting back into my addiction, my addictive thoughts, that's when I tend to isolate. And if I'm not isolating, that's when I'm telling other people that that doesn't work for me, that won't work for me. And so when we stay reachable and teachable, we keep ourselves open to how God can work in our life through other people. So thank you so much for sharing that. Can we please honor her one more time? That was awesome. And so now we are going to celebrate